What's going on, everybody? Dana Worthy here, and this is the second part for my jQuery for Backend developers, or rookie front-end developers series. To kind of recap on what we did last time was, in our last video, was we essentially went over the basics of jQuery selector. What we're going to be doing now is going over the basics of event binding for your jQuery objects. So to wire up some of the items on our form, we need to first off, anytime you click our submit button, right now it's automatically going to post back, and so we're gonna implement something to prevent that. We're also going to kind of show you some of the different types of events that you can bind to and the different methods for binding to it. And so to take care of our submit button first, we're going to just use the simple bind on click function. So to do this, we can there are several ways to bind a click event. You can do bind on function. It's not the exact. This part we'll replace with something, but just for shorthand, there's button dot on. I'm sorry. There is actual click. There's a shorthand for that, not click. There's also one called delegate, but we would have to do it like this, dot delegate. I actually think you have to pass in a selector here. So we'll just pass in the ID. Delegate's a little bit longer to use. And so all these do the exact same thing. When your element is clicked on, it's going to fire off whatever this function is. And so the most common and most recent one is the on function. And so that's going to be the one we're going to be using. Now, all all these events, they're going to pass in an event object. And so now whenever we click our submit button, before it actually submits the form, it's going to execute whatever code we have in here. Now, to prevent it from actually doing the full post back, there's several things we can do. We can do return false, or we can do event dot prevent default. Now there are occasions where you want to use return false or prevent default. Return false behind the scenes is doing prevent default, and there's also prevent propagation, I believe. And so that's a little bit more of an advanced feature where if as the jQuery elements events were bubbling up the DOM. So for instance, you click the submit button, but you also had something tied to field set. Anytime there's a click event, it would prevent that from executing. So typically the safest bet is to use prevent default. Oh shoot, I just crashed Visual Studio, I believe. Okay, my Vim plugin has been acting finicky lately. So we're going to refresh the page, and we try to click the submit, or we do click the submit button, but the form does not post back anymore. So that is how we're going to prevent our form from submitting, and we're going to instead, in a later tutorial, we're going to put all of our validation inside of that. So next what we're going to do is show some of the functions that we can use on a checkbox. So the event we're going to bind to is change. So this will fire anytime the checkbox is clicked and its value is changed. So typically what you'll want to do inside of a checkbox is determine whether it's checked or not. And there's several ways to do it, and for a while there's a lot of browser inconsistencies on this. And so we're going to be going over 4 ways on how to do this. So the first way, and probably the simplest, is doing this dot checked. Now you may be saying, well, whoa, what's this? So anytime you fire off, anytime you do an event like this, the context of the keyword this becomes whatever the HTML object is. So the DOM object inside of this is going to be the actual checkbox itself, and we can access your core JavaScript functionality here. So if we were wanting to use a jQuery one, we can do we can wrap this inside of a jQuery constructor, and then access the property is checked. Now this is oh, I forgot to close parentheses. This is another jQuery selector that you can utilize for CSS and jQuery. There is a part of the jQuery API documentation that you can learn to see all those. So I think we could also do like is even or whatever inside of that one. Another one we can use is the property, or just prop checked console.log, and then this one becomes a little bit tricky. It's been a little while since I've coded out these tutorials, so we'll see what happens with that one. So this one is actually checking the attribute, and essentially the difference between an attribute and a property is the attribute is the actual HTML that's plugged into the page inside the DOM. The property is the JavaScript side of it, so it can act differently based on it. And we'll fire this off and see what we get with it. And so I'm going to do that. So we're going to click it and check, and since there actually is not an attribute of checked equals checked on the HTML object, that's always going to return that it's always going to return undefined, or the equivalent. It's essentially the equivalent of null. So we're going to add a checked equals checked. Now this sets the initial value of it of the checkbox to checked. So, well, it's supposed to. Okay, let's try that again. Why do you hate me? Okay. This is supposed to be checked. Let's just fire up a new. Boo. Okay. Screw you, Java. Okay. That's weird. Alright. Maybe it needs to be at the end. Do one last change on this, and I really thought I had this down. Okay, that's weird. I really thought that was working. Oh well, okay, so moving on. So the typical way that I would recommend doing this is just do this dot checked. And so next we're going to mess with our drop-down list and show some of the pieces that we can use inside of the for manipulating a drop-down list. So SL type dot on. This can use the same one as change. There's a full list of all the events you can bind to inside of the jQuery API. You can learn just about everything you need to know from the jQuery API. Just reading through its documentation has some really good stuff with some examples inside of it. Log. And we're going to go ahead and just throw it inside of a console log so that we can see what JavaScript items we have available. Now we're going to get the selected value of it. Now there's two ways to get the value of an input. There's the jQuery way and the standard way, and more often than not I see people just do simple jQuery way. Now it has a lot of extra work behind it, so it's best to I recommend just using the raw JavaScript value. So we're doing this dot value, which is going to return the value of the selected index or selected element. We're going to do this dot val. This essentially does the same thing, except for it creates a jQuery object out of it and then accesses the value object. It does the exact same thing as this. There's just more work going on behind the scenes. So let's throw it back up. I'm going to relaunch this in Firefox. And so anytime we change this, we get ones all the way down the line, and so and also our object. So what's going on behind the scenes with this is that each element inside of it has a value of 1, 2, or whatnot. That should return an empty string or 0. Did I do selected index on the? Okay. Slightly confused. Should only be wait a second, what in the world? That's not my code. Okay, something odd is going on right now. It's referring to a bunch of stuff that is not inside of our JavaScript. Firefox. Alright, let's see if this other instance does the same thing. It's blowing my mind. Okay, well, I guess that's okay. Very curious on why that's going on. So anyway, long story short, we're going to just go ahead and paste in there what we have from our other one. Alright, so we had the standard jQuery object. We had this dot value, this dot val, and the last one that I was going to show you is how to get the selected index. This was something that frequently we would use inside of .NET forms for validation, is on the code behind check to see if the selected index was greater than 0. So with jQuery, you can easily check the property of selected index to make sure you actually have an element, or actually have a value on the selected in the drop-down list. Now there's a bunch of mouse events that we can also bind to, which typically you would use for something interactive like a menu or some sort like a rotator or something like that. There's tons of different events you can bind to on a mouse over, mouse enter, mouse exit. Couple other ones are all outlined in the jQuery API. And so before using one, make sure you know what it's doing behind the scenes. For the sake of this demo, we're not going to be doing any of those, but they're pretty handy and you can do some pretty cool stuff with it. So anyway, that kind of wraps up the event binding of this series. The next one we're going to do is some basic validation, less JavaScript and more actual JavaScript of what you can do to validate a form. So thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one.